Welcome back to the Asvab Domination Podcast. Today, we're diving into an inspiring conversation with Lieutenant Rex Serrao, a highly accomplished officer with a unique and intentional journey into the military. Most people join the military without a clear reason, but Lieutenant Serrao stands out. His decision was deliberate, thoughtful, and rooted in a deep sense of purpose. From navigating the long road to U.S. citizenship to balancing a successful tech career in the Bay Area while serving in the National Guard, his story is packed with lessons on discipline, leadership, and relentless self-improvement. Expect to learn about the mindset that helped him ace the ASVAB with a perfect 99 score, his experience going through officer candidate school, and how he applies the philosophy of extreme ownership to every aspect of his life. Whether you're preparing for the ASVAB, considering a military career, or just looking for motivation to level up, this episode is for you. Let's jump right in. Hope you enjoy this one, guys. This was a lot of fun. Welcome to the Asvab Domination Podcast, where we help you crush the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, also known as the ASVAB, in order to achieve your dreams of serving in the United States Armed Forces. I'm your host, Mickey Gamonal, and I'm excited to share my years of experience and expertise in ASVAB preparation with you. In each episode, we'll dive deep into test material, strategies for success, and insights from military veterans and experts. Whether you're a high school student considering military service or a seasoned professional seeking to advance your career, this podcast is your ultimate guide to mastering the ASVAB and achieving your goal. Let's dominate the ASVAB together. Welcome, everybody, back to the Asvab Domination Podcast. I'm so excited. Today, I am speaking with Lieutenant Rex Serrao. Lieutenant Serrao is an outstanding lieutenant, and he's one of the people who joined the military for a very unique reason. And that was one of the things that really kind of made me focus on why, getting to know this lieutenant a little bit better. Majority of people, when I ask them why they joined the military, they're not really sure oftentimes. Even students who I help to teach ASVAB to, they may be trying for months and months and months to join the military, but they don't really have a ton of intention behind it. And that's one thing that I can say for Lieutenant Serrao is his motives in life always seem very intentional. He seems super coherent in why he's doing what he's doing. And so I appreciate that perspective, and I'm so happy to have you on the show today to kind of share your story.
Happy to be here, sir. Looking forward to kind of share a little bit about myself and how I made some of the choices I made.
Awesome. Cool. Well, with that, let's jump right into it. I will ask you about your ASVAB story, but we'll do that a little bit later. I want to start by talking about you're someone who is very gainfully employed. It seems like you have kind of the career situation situated because you're actually in tech in the Bay Area, which is, something that I've only heard about on podcasts. So it's great to have someone who's actually there doing it. But yeah, I'm just going to start with my favorite question. Why did you join the military?
It's interesting because in about 2020, I really didn't know much about the military or the Army or what the National Guard really was. It just happened to be the year that I got my citizenship. And, that was a momentous occasion for me and my family, my wife. One of the things that happens, I think, once you become a citizen of a new place is you start to move up Maslow's hierarchy, right? You start to move from food and safety and shelter, safety and shelter for your loved ones, so on and so forth. And you get to the very top of Maslow's hierarchy, which is you start to worry about things like self-actualization, right? That's just a fancy way of saying, what does life really mean to me? What mark do I want to make in life? And so on and so forth. And I hadn't realized that I tamped down on a lot of that stuff while I focused on just finding a job, establishing a career, buying a house, becoming a citizen and all that. Once I became a citizen, though, I did start to spend some time in the space of what does it mean that I have become a citizen? And going back a little further, I moved in the States, primarily for financial reasons, right? I came here to do my undergraduate degree, which happens to be in electrical engineering. And then I started working. And the process to become a citizen is a fairly long one. It took me about 17 years to actually, from the day I came to the US to start and the day I got my citizenship is a fairly long journey. And so once I became a citizen, I started to ask some of those self-actualization focused questions. And one of the things that really stood out to me was, I moved to the States initially, as I mentioned, for economic reasons. But, I come to love what the US stands for: free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association. Where I was born and raised in the Middle East, these things are not only not a fundamental right, they're often actively, I'll say managed, to be polite about it, right? And so these values that really meant so much to me, I didn't know a way to express to I think myself and signal to people around me that the US may have started as an economic destination for me, but ended up being a place that I deeply fell in love with. And I'll caveat that and say, not everything about the US at all times is wonderful and works out for everybody. But I think about the potential in what this country can be when it's its best self. That motivated me quite a bit. And so that thought just kind of sat in my head for a while without knowing how to really express, or bring that dream to life, to like communicate my dedication to, the idea of the US beyond just an economic. And so it happened to be that in 2021, a year after I became a citizen, I was looking online for workouts, and I'm a benchmark type of guy, and that'll become more evident later when I talk about the ASVAB. And one of the benchmarks of physical fitness happened to be the Army physical fitness test. And as I was researching the Army physical fitness test, because I figured, sure, I should probably be able to run 2 miles and do some deadlifts and, sprint for a while, I started to discover this thing called the National Guard. And I was like, oh, this is a thing that I could actually maybe do because I love my job. It's fulfilling mentally, financially, etc. And so this was a way that I could actually thread the needle. I could both do my job and keep my career going, but then also express that admiration for the country by sacrificing. I grew up pretty privileged. My time in the US has been, again, pretty privileged. And so this was a way for me to go beyond that. But I'll say that's about 70% of the reason I joined the National Guard. 20% of it was a realization that in the Bay Area, in tech, you start to hang out with a lot of other people who are in tech who live in the Bay Area. And oddly enough, it doesn't matter if you're Hispanic, white, Asian, Caucasian, Black, like your opinions all start to look and sound the same. It's a very odd thing. It's actually one of the most cultural diverse parts of the country, or maybe even the world. But the opinions become very homogenous over time. And one of the things I kept hearing in my research was in the Army, people from all stripes come together. Folks who've got PhDs or just graduated high school or have a GED, folks who have great jobs or are struggling for work, folks who have large families, no families, small families, from large towns to, tiny 500 person, villages from the Appalachians. And so I really wanted to expand my understanding of who is in America besides tech folks in the Bay Area. And then finally, 10% was really around something that I'd noticed, that folks in tech that had a military background brought with them a certain level of intensity, a certain level of rigor, a certain level of fanaticism to get the job done. And that was very consistent regardless of, the type of job they had in the military. And so I was really curious about the leadership development philosophy. And so that leadership development was the last 10% to see what was the Army doing in particular to develop leaders. And so those three reasons put together, are finally, why I decided to kind of take the plunge.
Awesome. And I love that answer. I mean, it's so thought out. I think it's great that, your heart is the 70% of it. And then kind of the other benefits are still, related to, emotional things, but they're a little more focused on, what it's giving you rather than what you're giving it. And I think it's great. I think it's great that you think in those terms. Now, the easy follow-up question is, you've been in the military now for a certain amount of time. Do you think you're getting those results? So if 70% is to kind of pay it back to the United States and you're happy with your situation, And then 20% is to expand your viewpoints, right? So to see how other people think. And then that remaining 10 is to just see and interpret other ways of living and that kind of thing. Do you feel like Army's delivering on all three of those?
So far, the answer is kind of unequivocally a yes. To expand on it, I think when I imagined what I imagined it would be like to be part of the Army would be that it would hurt and I would be of service or doing things that were of service to others, regardless of my opinion about the activity. And both of those have been very true. Going through basic, going through officer candidate school, incredibly painful. And I feel like I definitely was of service in some way, during those moments. But even, joining the unit and learning from you and the other lieutenants on the team, and then obviously our core of NCOs, even things that I do to help them in small or large ways, like, hey, can you follow up on, my reenlistment packet? Can you help me find jobs, full-time work in the military? Even those ways are extremely fulfilling. And to know that all of it serves a larger purpose feels really good. It feels really good. I think on the other side, both the see and meet different people with different perspectives and the leadership philosophy, again, just a thorough yes, because, my PSG, he's at SLC right now, with the senior leaders course. He's kind of moving up the ranks. And he told me before he left, he's like, hey, I didn't complete high school, but I got that GED. And for someone who didn't complete high school, but went and got his GED, think about the grit, think about the tenacity, think about how he decided to push through to kind of make that happen. He and I approach things so differently, but as he told me, he finds it so complementary. And that's true with everybody that I meet. I see such different perspectives, and not to be very political, but whatever your opinion is on gun rights or politics or what so have you, just to see and hear different perspectives, regardless of my own personal view, has been personally enriching. And lastly, I think seeing the leadership philosophy, it going through officer candidate school was one of the hardest things I've done, because it's a pretty long program and sustained over 20 months. But I could see how they, through mental, physical, and emotional rigor, create leaders that have the same bent. Like, you could pick any three people from my cohort, and I could tell you if they saw something out of regs, that all behaved the same way. They're all kind of like, tighten up and go, oh, we got to do something about this. And that intensity, that rigor, I could see where that comes from in the way the Army builds its leaders. So it's been, so far anyway, I think I'm getting what I hope to get out of my stint here.
Perfect. And how long, just for everybody at home, how long have you been in the military thus far?
So I went to basic in 2021, October. I signed my contract in August 2021. I then went through OCS when I got back. So I'm sorry, I signed my contract in August 2021. I went to basic in 2022. I went through officer candidate school 23 and 24, and I commissioned as an officer August 2024. And so I've been with the unit since then. So about 5 months or so. I've been with the 1048 quartermaster unit out of Hollister.
Perfect. But you swore in about 3 years so far.
Yep.
No, and that's one of the most interesting things that I've found in the Guard is the way the time expands and compresses when it's spread out like that.
It's funny you say that. We talked a little bit about this during our last drill, and it's something about actually given thought to, that in regular life, you're living 30 days, but only 2 days at the end of the month, really get expended on drill time. And so at the end of the year, you've put in about a year of your life in your regular life, but your guard time, you only have about, 30 days or so. So this time compression and dilation is very interesting. It's just a fascinating concept to me when you think about, guard and reserves and what it can do for you.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely a big fan. It's minimal time constraint, but you were able to commission fairly, it took a little bit longer than it would have at federal OCS, but
Yep.
you end up as a commissioned officer all the same. And not only that, you're developing the skills that come with that commissioned officership throughout that period. And so I would say, just based off of you as well as our other lieutenant who did state OCS, you guys both show up with that same officership that you would gain from a federal OC, no matter the amount of time, whether it was expanded or contracted. So that's great.
Yeah, the federal OCS program is interesting. I think there's a lot of pros to that program. It's quicker is kind of what I'd say probably the best part of the federal OCS program. You're also submersed in it. There's no distractions generally if you don't have anything going on in your personal life. And candidly, a lot of folks from our cohort wanted to go to federal OCS and kind of knock it out all at once. I would say the pros for the state program, one of the things it teaches you is it actually teaches you the rhythm of the guard, because you go back to your regular life and then you come back for the weekend. The intensity ramps up pretty quickly, but that rhythm is actually how things actually, play out when you are at a unit. You end up doing, for example, for those who are already in the guard, you end up doing a dark night, every month while you're in state OCS. And so which is just for your listeners, it's just a meeting that you perform once a month to prepare for the monthly drill, be you at reserves or the guard. And so there's that. In that way, it's a huge pro because, joining the unit, your rhythm is already set. Your family already understands you'll be gone for some period of time, 2 to 4 days. It's a smooth transition. What does make that state OCS traditional, they refer to it, hard, is that takes about 18 to 20 months, depending on how you count. And that's a long time for nothing to go wrong in your life and a long time for you to maintain that motivation, right? Because things can get really hard. You have a lot of time to brood, should you allow yourself to, between the trainings that, and the trainings are pretty intense, physically, mentally, just like federal OCS, the goal is to see how you act and how you lead under stress. So, by golly, they got the stress, right? So that would be the one thing to kind of be aware of is if your motivation pool is maybe not as high, or you have a lot of distractions in your personal life, definitely I would recommend opting for either federal or accelerated state, which tries to mimic federal in terms of timeline as much as possible.
Awesome. Yeah, I hadn't heard of accelerated state, but I think you're spot on. I know I can't imagine going through state OCS just because OCS for me was very similar to like basic training 2.0. And it's, you have people who outrank you, which is
Yep.
everyone, and they're always looking for a reason to yell at you pretty much throughout that whole time. And if that was split up into a weekend where I have a month of being like a normal human being, a normal civilian, and then I go in and I'm at the bottom of the food chain once a month, that would be much more difficult than having it all, over the course of a couple months, in my opinion. But
Yeah. I will say like that is true. That is how people felt, especially prior enlisted. I would say the adjustment period was much harder when they had to do it once every month and then go back to, their unit or something else, or their day job if they're AGR. That adjustment can be hard. It really depends on what you're looking for and what works out best for you. I didn't really want to leave for an extended period of time. And so for me, state OCS worked out better because I could do my job. There was minimal disruption, so on and so forth. And also candidly, I wanted to also work on my physical fitness, and that gave me enough time to like build up my speed for my run, the weight I could deadlift, in a very safe way, but even because in federal OCS and state accelerated, you're up there and you're either fit and you're going to pass that run fairly quickly, or you run out of time. And if you push too hard, you might injure yourself. So these are some of the factors I think that I looked at, especially in terms of picking or trying to pick, state OCS, traditional, state accelerator, or federal.
Yeah. No, we had that. We had some people, that just weren't physically ready, even at federal. If you're doing that, there was I think it was a 13-mile ruck march with 50 pounds. And that took some people out. We also had our land nav course over at the Ranger School. and that took people out. A lot of people would just twist their ankles or what have you.
Right.
The ACFT wasn't as common for people to get sept, but it does depend on that fitness. You're exactly right.
Yeah. And something that an OCS cadre once told me, we're going to dump this stress on you. You're going to feel it, all day, every day while you're at drill. The more physically fit you are, the more capable you'll be able to process what we're telling you to do and then do it. If you're on your 10th push-up and you're wheezing and you're tired and you're not able to process, it just makes the probability that you've heard the command clearly and your ability, and the probability that you form the correct response, like they all go down if your fitness level goes down. And so the more physically fit you are, that doesn't guarantee success. But what it does is it creates kind of the right environment or increases your chances that you'll make it all the way through.
Yeah, if you can hold on to your breath when a drill sergeant's yelling at you, you have a much better chance of doing less push-ups over the long term. It's a certainty. Awesome. Well, great. No, and I love the discussion about OCS just because it's not something that commonly we have on this podcast. But I think personally, I'm a big fan of being able to join the military at that higher rank, even though what we're talking about is, how you're the bottom of a totem pole for a certain amount of time. But that's a valuable time, just like Lieutenant Serrao has mentioned. But that time does kind of craft you into the type of soldier you're going to be for the remainder of your tenure. So let's move on. I do want to know about your Asvab experience. You seem like someone who thinks things out. I would imagine that you already had your at least bachelor's degree by the time you were joining the military. And I've had students who have had bachelor's degrees and joined the military, but the Asvab is its own breed of complicated or difficult. But I do want to mention and give credit where it's due. You're one of the few people who I've met who actually scored better than me on their Asvab. So
Thank you.
yeah. I mean, great work on you. So start with your score, and then if you could just tell us kind of your ASVAB story.
Yeah. So I got a 99 on the ASVAB. I think that's the highest that you can get because it's based on a percentile score. And so I was, definitely, it was a combination of luck and work that kind of got me there. You know what I'll go back to and kind of start that answer to talk about the ASVAB story is really talk about just standardized tests in general.
Okay.
Any standardized test benefits from a couple of, study techniques or techniques in general. The first one, I think the most important one is to realize that you really must study to the test. You are not just studying material to be generally knowledgeable, right? And I see a lot of people in a lot of standardized tests, and we have to do a lot of them in tech to get certification. So there's just a lot of testing that occurs. I see a lot of folks studying to gain knowledge purely as opposed to studying to the test. And that seems like it's at odds. And it's not, but it's a different relationship. For example, if you're studying just to study, you don't care about things like time. You don't really care about how much, you care a lot about like the depth of your knowledge, right? Versus when you're studying to a test or for a test, what you're really doing is you're looking at the rules of the test, you're looking at the shape of the test, you're coming up with strategies to take a standardized test really, really well. And so I'd say that's bullet point one, which is you really got to study for the test, not just study to gain general knowledge.
I love that. I like that explanation. And it's something that even though this is an ASVAB podcast, it's something that has never really been brought up here, is there's something virtuous about studying knowledge for knowledge's sake, right? And really understanding that a denominator is breaking the numerator into X number of pieces and that kind of like conceptual knowledge and building that.
Yeah.
And you're talking about something that's on the other side of like, this is the obstacle. How do we get across the obstacle? So I think that's great. I think people do study wrong. They spend, days, months, years studying the wrong stuff because they think they need to be math professionals when they really should be focusing on passing that test. So thank you for sharing that.
No, absolutely. The other thing I'd say is, the standardized tests in particular are not really about your novel ability in any subject. And what I mean by that is if you score high in math, doesn't actually mean you're good at math. And if you score high on English, doesn't actually mean you're good at English. What I found in my own education, and just, for your listeners, I was actually very bad at math growing up. It was only just where I grew up, we have these government exams in 10th grade that really kind of determine your future. It's very different than the States. And so I just kind of really did what I could, which is just did a lot more math. And it was in doing that I realized something. Math is really about pattern recognition. Like it truly is. If you do more math, you will be able to look at a problem and go, oh, I've seen this before. And you just need to keep doing it now to get to like, oh, I've seen this pattern before. And that's how you progress in math in general. But the test is also a test that validates your ability to recognize those patterns, whether it is in math, the various subjects, whether it is in English, whether it is in some of those mechanical tests, etc. And you shouldn't get fooled necessarily by the Asvab, kind of what it says on the tin, which is like, this is a general measure of things about mechanical, electrical, etc. Because you can study for the test, right? And any test that you could study for in using some of the strategies that you put out in your podcast and in your mentoring and teaching, is a test that can be optimized for. And so that really is the second thing, is it is a test, not of your knowledge, but it is a test of your ability to recognize patterns and then quickly figure out how to approach it, right? Like you talked about, I know exactly what a denominator signifies in the larger scheme of things, not so important, but knowing that quickly, hey, I know that if the top number is smaller than the bottom number, great. Like that's probably like less than a whole, and we move on. Things like those things matter a lot more when it comes to standardized tests in general. And one, I say that because I see a lot of people that generally go, oh, I'm not good at X, so I'm probably not going to test well. I've heard that when I was studying for the Asvab, I heard people talk about that with respect to math and then vocabulary. Oh, I don't read a lot, so I'm probably going to get, probably going to do poorly on the vocab, I don't do a lot of math, and so I'm probably going to do bad on the math test. And, when I covered my approach, you'll see it has nothing to do with the math that I already knew or the English that I already knew. It really was about just practice. So that's the second point, it's about pattern recognition. But my approach generally is for standardized tests. And this would be the third point. The number one thing you can do is practice taking standardized tests. It is the single most effective strategy that I've found. And even after my bachelor's degree, I've had to take upwards of 17 standardized tests. And I use the same strategy every time when it comes to tests. The final step is just take a crap load of practice tests. And so what I did initially was I only used one book. I used the Asvab for Dummies book. I did every problem that I could on the way just to determine where I needed to kind of study or read the book in more detail. And then I would just churn through those tests. And I would basically mark which answers I got wrong or which answers I got right, but I wasn't sure about it. And that second category is the category that, students in various subjects often miss because I got it right. I don't need to learn about it. I got it. And then they move on. But when you know an answer and when you kind of maybe picked something because you thought it maybe made sense. And then when you got something wrong. And those last two categories are worth going back and revising. And so what I did with the Asvab for Dummies book is I took all the tests in the book. There were about 7 tests in the book. And then they had an online code for another 10 tests. And so I took another 10 tests. And then everything that I got wrong, I just kept a log, pen and paper. I was like, okay, these subjects I keep making a mistake on. I should probably go back and reread this section of the book and not waste time on sections that I'm just like nailing over and over again. And I never stopped practicing, even though I was ready a month before the test. And I'll just share this last anecdote. When you take the test, the night before you take the test, we were put up in a hotel with you get a roommate, you stay in a hotel. It's kind of before you go to MEPS, and my roommate is also much younger than I am, is about, 18. Just was like, hey, dude, I'm going down to play the PS5 because I have a PS5. downstairs in the, had like a little special spot for the Army, right? And I was like, that's cool. I'm gonna be up here. I'm gonna be practicing some more. He's like, really? Like it is what it is. Like I'm like, maybe, but I'm gonna keep practicing because the last thing for me is whatever score you get, the worst feeling in the world to me is knowing that you didn't leave it all out on the field, right? That you stopped. You stopped at at your effort at 95%. You might as well have gone the 99% or 100% because no matter your score, at least you want to feel like you gave it your all. And then whatever your score is, whatever your line scores end up being, that really does become a true reflection of 100% of what you were able to perform at, which means if you want to retake the ASVAB, you have the most accurate estimate of what just happened versus you didn't really study that hard. You kind of partied the night before. You didn't take it that seriously. And you lose such an important diagnostic because that's a diagnostic under pressure, right? And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. It is incredibly important to take a test the way you're going to actually take the test. Taking a test, like, because the ASVAB, I forget the exact measure of the test. Sure, like, I think it's like 3 hours and some change.
Yeah, altogether it's about a little over 3 hours. But it's
Yeah.
9 subtests, and they vary from maybe 45 minutes down to 20, even on 11 minutes for word knowledge. So yeah, it's a pretty lengthy test across the
It's a
board.
pretty lengthy test. And one of the muscles that you need to develop and practice is the ability to sit down and take that test. I cannot tell you how many people I met, while I was at MEPS that said, oh, I've never actually done the full test all in one sitting. And, right away that, oh, that's a pretty risky move because the ability to like sit down and really focus for 4 hours, it's a marathon. And like a marathon, you want to be able to practice for that marathon. What's the likelihood that you just can get up and run a marathon today? It's probably not very high if you haven't practiced. And so it's that same muscle to take a 4-hour long test with various subjects that you might be strong at or maybe not so strong at. You really need to be able to have lived that experience over and over and over again. So you don't get tripped up if you don't know 2 or 3 questions in a row because you faced that situation before. And again, it all goes back to that pattern matching that I've been through this before. I can move through this. I've seen this problem before because I've done hundreds of problems. I can pull that knowledge quickly. So I would say those would be the biggest takeaways and kind of my methodology for how I prep for the ASVAB.
Awesome. No, that's a perfect answer. And the writing's on the wall, right? If you have a 99%, that means that you scored the best of the best. There's no one that scored more than you because it's a bell curve. So nobody gets 0, nobody gets 100. 99 is as good as you're going to get. And the reason that you got it, it sounds like, is because you did, was it 17 altogether? 17 practice?
It was 17 practice tests.
You did you do full practice tests for all 17?
Yeah, full practice tests, full 3 hour, the 3 hours, some change practice tests. Because basically every weekend I would wake up a little earlier because I didn't want to disrupt my time with my wife and, and my dog. And so I'd wake up usually about 6 or so, and I would just like sit down, do a full test. And then I get to still continue with my day by 10 a.m. I'm good to go on a walk with my dog or, whatever else I wanted to do. But yeah, it was full practice tests.
Awesome. I want to double click on your leave it all on the field mentality. I kind of want to zoom in there because as someone who has a bachelor's degree, even someone who may have struggled with math back in the day, 17 practice tests, other people would say is over the top, right? And like that is a lot. How do you, and you already kind of explained why you would want to do it that way. You said, I would do it that way because I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing in hindsight that I didn't give everything I got. My question for you, as just kind of the devil's advocate, you could probably get any job you want after taking even 2 practice tests because of all of your prior knowledge and everything like that.
Yeah.
The 99% on an ASVAB, all you really need for everybody out there is you need a 31 to join the Army. You need maybe a 45 or a 50 for Air Force or other subjects. 99%, that 49 points higher than everybody else. And honestly, the top 1% of the world why did you have the drive to study for that? Or like what drives that?
Yeah, it's funny. It wasn't specific to the ASVAB. So there's like there's another test called it's corporate governance and enterprise IT. I took that test in 2018 and I scored the highest in the world for that test.
As well.
Uh, we can just
Everybody knows that's two tests that he's best at in the world. Great.
but the reason I say that is I did the same thing. I bought a test bank, which is a book of just questions, right? Organized as tests. And I would just take those tests over and over and over again. Because, what I found in life is, in general, you can't control the genes you were born with, right? Like there's some people who are legitimately geniuses. They can read something once and they just remember it. They have a didactic memory, right? They can see a number and they can remember the number a year later. It's totally cool. I don't have any of that. But what I do have, and what I have observed in life, is the people who go the farthest aren't necessarily the people who have the best genes, who have the most natural talent. What I've observed is the people, that go the farthest are the people who do the consistent work every day up until the limit that they want to work, right? And I say it that way because I work hard for these tests. You know what I mean? So I would hate to work 70% and then get a score and then walk away from that score going, you know what? If only I studied a little bit more. Because what it does is it actually disrespects my own time that I put towards the test in the first place, right? Because what I'm saying is I put 10 hours into test prep. If only I put in 5 hours more, I would have done better. Well, then I'm going to have to live with that for an extended period of time. I don't want to live with that. What I want to live with is, you know what? No matter what happened, I give it 100%. It was all out in the field. And so even though probably after my fifth or sixth test, I was like, I'm probably going to get a good score. I don't have to worry about, getting the exact line score I need for, to join OCS, because those scores are higher, right? I think 145 GT, I believe. I didn't want to be in a position where I missed it by 1 point or missed it by 2 points, or because that would be disastrous. To me, it would be disastrous. To me, it would be so disrespectful of the first 5 tests that I took. I already did the work. And so I think it's a way to honor my own times. And then a phrase I heard, many years ago was, always think about the favor you're doing for your future self, and you want to be the type of person today that your future self will thank. And today I look back at the guy who did 17 tests and they're like, hey Rex, you did a great job. Thank you for setting me up for success. Right. I never want to be in a situation where I look back at that guy and go, oh man, I wish you put in a little bit more effort, because life would have been pretty different if you did. That's a terrible feeling. And I don't want to live life, with that burden. I'd rather live being grateful to my past self that put in the work.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I've heard this on all sorts of podcasts, is that the relationship that you have with yourself is the most important relationship in your life, because you always live in your own head. Yourself is the only person you can't get away from. But you definitely live that mantra a little bit more than most people that I've met. I think that's incredible that you are paying yourself 5 years from now every single day. Do you do you feel like you take the time to relax as well? Do you feel like you give your like do you feel like you, how do you say, honor present Rex as well as 5 years from now Rex? Or
Oh yeah. Yeah. So for example, I have board game night tonight. I organize it. I schedule it. I get the food for it. I have my buddies over. We drink beer, pizza, and play board games, right? I have a weekend trip planned with my wife next week. We're going to go overnight to a town called Benicia. My wife, me and the dog, we're going to do something there. I have a meetup with some friends scheduled this next Friday. It's one of the funniest things. I remember my mother telling me this when I was in high school, and I never believed her because I thought she was wrong. And in my life, what I've noticed is my mother gets progressively more right as I get older. And one of the things she said is, the more disciplined you are, the more fun you'll be able to have. I never really got it until I realized that, oh, I'm doing so many things. Let me start scheduling some of these things. And so one of the techniques that I read in, I think it's Atomic Habits is the book, is they actually say schedule the fun items first. So usually at the beginning of a month, so like, for example, I like going to community theater. I already have all the community theater tickets that I'm going to go to for 2025. I already bought them all the way through to November. And for the theaters that don't have tickets, I have something on my calendar that says, hey, check in April when they sell their tickets so I can go buy it. And so by doing that, you create the space for all these fun moments. And it feels like you're really busy and you feel like you're doing a lot of things, but you realize how much time goes into, what I call dead time. Just like on TikTok, you're on Instagram, you're just on YouTube or whatever, and you don't realize how much time gets taken away. But once you start scheduling things, you just find that you're going to execute your schedule because it's on your schedule. You just kind of live off I live off my calendar, and you end up doing almost everything that you want to do. I also recommend this book to your listeners. It's called 4 a.m. Miracle Morning. It's a bit extreme, and I did it, but I only did it for about 5 years. I didn't do it longer than that. That was just a phase in my life. Only 5. Wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, like the book said. And what the book would say was, why would you want to study? This is while I was working. Like, why would you want to go to work, give 100% at work, and then come home and give the remainder of what you have to yourself and your family? Why don't you give the best of yourself to you? And I was like, oh, that's a crazy idea. And so I would actually wake up in the morning at 4. And the first thing I would do is I would do a very light, I just kind of a very light workout, just like 10 minutes. It's not even a big deal. It's like push up just to get the blood flowing. And then I would actually study for all the various certifications I was, taking. And then by the time I got to work, I was like, I already did what I needed to do. And so when I came home, I could just really focus on my family. So it's in a weird way, discipline unlocks more time for yourself to have fun, more time with your family, your wife, your kids, your extended family, and just more joy, because it pulls out all of that dead times in your lives. So yeah, I'd say, Mom, you're right, if you're listening.
Awesome. Props to Rex's mom. That's great. That's great. And I'm happy she told you that. Everybody that's hearing this now is better for it. I think that's a message that only provides agency. It's only going to help people to get better. So I think that's awesome. All right. Well, this has been an outstanding episode. I do want to ask, is there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up?
One thing that I think is a value, a mindset, I'm not sure what to kind of refer to it, is, I'd love to share the idea of extreme ownership with your readers. I think there's a book by that name.
Jocko Willink?
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's so funny because I lived the philosophy when I read this book, and I was like, oh my God, that's what I'm talking about. So, and so if you haven't got the book, I highly recommend the book to your readers. He says things, he's going to say it far more eloquently with stories that are far more motivating than I will say it. But what I advocate for your readers and this for your listeners, regardless of how old they are, whether they're 17 or 20 or 30 or 40 or what so have you, is to really look at every situation and ascribe as much as you can to yourself, right? As much as you can ascribe to yourself, you should, even if things are going wrong. And the reason I say that is, even if things are going wrong in your life, if you see it as, hey, I could have done this different, it's a mentality that gives you a lot of power. It's a mentality that gives you a lot of control. It's a mentality that will force your mind to say, what can I do differently? How can I change the situation? The flip side of that mentality is something doesn't go right and people go, well, it's not my fault. It was the situation. It was this other dude. It was this other person. They messed with me. They set me up to fail. You may be right technically, but that framing of the situation doesn't really create the mindset that you have control to do something about it or be better about it. And so regardless about your station in life, if things are working out or not working out, I urge all your listeners, especially because I think a lot of them are younger, to take that mentality and look at everything that's going on in their life that isn't working well and ignore, more so what other people are doing to them or what the situation and focus more on what's in their control and what they can change. It is an incredibly empowering mindset. It's a mindset that I think turns you into a leader. It's a mindset that puts you in the driver's seat of your own life as opposed to being the passenger. And it's one that I feel particularly passionate about. It'll help you in your personal life, in your professional life. It will help you do things you didn't think was possible. And it turns you, from a victim into someone that is in control of all situations. So it's an idea that's, personally valuable to me, and I find a lot of value in it. And so, I hope your listeners will find value from the idea as well. But definitely, Jocko did it better in his book. I don't get a commission if you buy his book, but I highly recommend it.
No, I think that's great. I think it's a great message, especially, I mean, maybe it's all times, feel like this, but there's definitely a feeling out there that the world is happening to us, and I think you know, a lot of things out there are telling us that that's happening to us, and we should be either upset about it or happy about it, buy more stuff because of it. And it's all just happening to us. We are only, just existing for things
Right.
given to us. So I think it's great that you're talking about, taking that level of ownership.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really powerful idea and one that is relevant to anyone taking the ASVAB. Because again, like you could say, my teacher didn't teach me well, or my school was underfunded, or, my parents, aren't great at math, and so they can't help me either. And all of those might be true, but them being true and your focus on that doesn't actually help you get better. By turning around the situation and positioning it as, I'm not getting good scores on the ASWAB because I haven't worked hard enough, or I don't have the right study methodology. That immediately goes, okay, hey, I know what I can change. I can work harder. I can, work with, Lieutenant Gamonal to like figure out how I can study better or smarter. And it puts you in control of situations that maybe you didn't think you were in control of. And so that mindset is a real pivot point, and I think it's critical to get the best out of yourself and your journey in the Army once you take that aspect.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think right now I'm hearing, COVID, right? Oh, I didn't learn fractions because of COVID or something along those lines. Or, I only had long-term subs in all of my English classes or something
Yep.
along that. And you're right. That is true. I think that's something that people overlook. It doesn't matter the validity of your excuse. You are in a position where you can change it only if you believe that you can actually change it. Handing that control to external factors just kind of leaves you high and dry. So I think that's a great message. I think that's a great message for anybody trying to improve their life in any way. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. No, otherwise, thank you so much for wanting to hang out with me and learn about my story and, my ABSAT methodology, how about OCS and why I joined the military. It was kind of great to relive some of those memories for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming onto the show. I feel like my IQ goes up every time I talk to you. So I
Oh,
appreciate
you're
the
being very
time.
kind. You're being very kind.
No, sincerely, here and at drills. So hopefully everybody who's listening, their IQ went up as well. So thank you so much, Rex, and all the best to you.
Hey, best of luck to you and all your listeners as well. Take care.
Thanks. Remember to be kind to yourself and treat yourself as a learner. Are you considering a career in the military but feeling overwhelmed by the ASVAB exam? Look no further than GamonalTutors.com for the best ASVAB prep courses. Our courses are designed by experienced instructors to help you master the best sections of the ASVAB exam, including mathematics, English, and general science. We use proven teaching methods and provide extensive practice materials to ensure that you are fully prepared on test day. With GamonalTutors.com, you'll have access to comprehensive study guides, personalized tutoring sessions, and online practice exams. Our courses are available on demand,
so you can learn at your own pace and on your own schedule. Don't let the ASVAB exam hold you back from achieving your career goals. Sign up for GamonalTutors.com ASVAB prep courses today and take the first step towards a successful military career.